CIA-backed Angolan rebel forces. So it's not even in U.S. economic interest to destabilize Angola.
When Savimbi was brought to Washington in the winter of '86, remember, he dined at the White House, and yet he went on television promising the aid that he was being given, that he would attack Gulf oil facilities, which facilities had been built by loans which Reagan had approved. In addition to which, he has kept the central part of Angola frozen and the Benguela Railroad shut, and that's Zaire, our big client's only economically viable egress to the sea, is that railroad that we pay Savimbi to keep shut. Meanwhile, the human horror, the Red Cross counts 55,000 people in Angola who have been maimed by Savimbi's landmines and attacks.
And George Bush continues to support those forces.
John, one of the analyses that I heard about the situation was that there was pressure within South Africa to get out. They wanted to get out of the Angolan situation. They didn't want to support it financially, and also there were problems because their soldiers were getting killed. So the United States said, okay, go ahead, pull out. We'll come in and we'll directly supervise the situation and take care of it. So it wasn't a big victory for the Angola government or for Cuba in that respect. It was just a switch of people who were going to control it.
Well, this is exactly the point I was trying to make, is that us, Crocker playing big arbitrator, and we didn't agree to give the region peace. But it is a fact that Namibia is getting its independence. The South Africa is going to try to do what we did to Nicaragua in 1933 when we pulled the Marines out and created the Guard and left it behind with Somoza, in charge. They're trying to create the same type of a situation and have a proxy control of it. From the Cuban point of view, the Angolans are being left facing a dire situation, with Savimbi still being funded to destabilize, and the South Africans still coming across the border, and the Cubans coming home. And in Cuba's interests, and it's very difficult to fault them, because they've sacrificed a lot of their own and their own capital to the extent that they can, and they're not a wealthy country, to stick up for their allies, the Angolans. But this is the point at which they could, in fact, come home with having accomplished, a measurable objective. But Namibia is independent because of what they did.
Yet the independence of Namibia, or any country in Africa, is precarious because of the CIA presence there. Whenever an independent African nation takes a socialist road, or a road that goes against the interests or ideologies of the CIA, they destabilize the government. Kwame Nkrumah wrote a book called Class Struggles in Africa that documented the ways that the CIA overthrew about 25 progressive governments in Africa, including Nkrumah's own Ghanaian government in the 1960s. So if Namibia takes a route that the CIA doesn't like, they can act to destabilize it, one way or the other. So that's really the precarious situation that all independent nations in Africa face.
This is one of Chomsky's best points, is that when a country tries to escape, our first effort is to bludgeon them back into the fold, and if that fails, as it did in Cuba conspicuously, as it did in Vietnam conspicuously, as it's done in Angola to date, and Nicaragua to date, then the fallback is to starve them out. Create economic chaos so that they will not be a positive example to anyone else to want to break free.
We don't want to have a military victory. It's enough if you have to lose one life, and any military glory really fades in the face of losing lives, because we feel responsible for the life of each and every of those men there. We are striving for a fair solution to the problem, a dignified solution to the problem, which would guarantee the security of Angola and the independence of Namibia. And in exchange for that, with pressure, in the period of time agreed, we will withdraw our troops.
hemos creado todas las condiciones para que haya una solución.
The conditions so that a settlement can be reached.
Implica riesgos.
Of course, that entails
hemos
risks.
estado dispuestos a correr los
And
riesgos.
we have been willing to run
y se va a producir
such
una
risks.
confrontación seria.
And a serious confrontation
hemos
might
tenido
occur.
que correr el riesgo porque de otra
But
forma
we
no
have to
habría
run
solución.
such a risk, otherwise there wouldn't be a settlement.
Pero no estamos buscando ese objetivo.
But we are
de una
not looking for a
victoria
confrontation to obtain an
sino una
important
solución razonable,
military
justa, de paz.
victory. We rather want
Una solución a una parte del problema de África Austral.
A solution to part of the
Porque
problem
tal
of
vez,
Southern Africa, because
si se logra esta
perhaps
solución política,
if this political solution is
garantizada por las
attained,
Naciones Unidas y se
we
logra
will
la
be
independencia de
and
Namibia,
if the independence of Namibia
yo
is
creo que puede
attained,
irse acercando la hora
I think that
en
then
que
the time will get
Sudáfrica tenga que
closer
discutir con el
when
ANC
South Africa would have to
y
discuss with
tenga
the
que discutir los
ANC,
problemas de la
and when
apartheid.
South Africa would have to discuss the
Después de
problems
esto
of
ya no le quedará
apartheid.
en las
After
condiciones
this,
actuales del mundo.
in the
En
present
un
conditions
clima
of the
de
world,
distensión, de paz,
in an
de
atmosphere
desarme,
of detente, peace, disarmament,
si se logra
South
esta
Africa will
solución,
have no other choice
yo creo
than
que
to
habrá el
discuss with
momento,
the
llegado el
ANC.
momento de
I
exigirle a
think that
Sudáfrica
if such a settlement is attained, the time
que
will have come
discuta con el
to
ANC
demand from South Africa to discuss with the
la
ANC
solución del problema de
the
la
settlement
apartheid.
of the problem of apartheid.
Sudáfrica sabe que está en una
Of course,
situación
South
en un
Africa
peligro.
knows that it is in a situation of
Porque tuvo esas
danger
fuerzas en contra.
because all those forces,
Tuvo esa
they
fuerza
had
en
never had to face such an
Y
important
Sudáfrica es
force.
calculadora.
And
cínica,
South Africa is very
oportuna.
calculating, cynical,
Si puede hacer
opportunistic.
algo impune
If
lo
they can
hace.
do something and get away
Si se
with
puede
it,
meter
they
en
try to do
Mozambique,
it.
se mete.
If they could go into
Si se
Mozambique,
puede
they would do
meter
it.
en Zambia,
If they can go into
se mete a
Zambia,
hacer
they
cualquier
do
crimen.
it. To do anything, to
Se
commit
puede meter
crimes.
en Lesoto,
If it can go into Lesotho,
si se puede en Botswana,
if it can go to Botswana,
donde quiera que se puede
wherever
meterse,
South Africa can go, it goes.
donde no tiene baja.
Where it doesn't
Donde
suffer
impune.
casualties, where they can do away with it,
Pero cuando tiene que
where they
enfrentarse a
can
una
get away with
fuerza
it.
como
But
esa
now,
que
when
está
they have to face such an important
Entonces
force
ya-
as the concentration of Cuban Angolan forces there, now they think it twice.
Imagina las cosas. Es
They try to
cuidadoso.
calculate the risks, and
Esa
they
es
are
la
careful,
realidad.
they are watchful, and
Esa es
that's
la-
real reality
Y ellos
there.
saben que están ante un riesgo.
And they know that they are in the face of a risk,
De ello va a depender lo que ocurra aquí.
and it will be up to
Si
them what
reaccionan con
happens here.
soberbia, arrogancia
If they
y
if they
quieren una
react
confrontación,
with haughtiness, and if they want a
puede ser que
confrontation,
pierdan no solo Namibia,
it could happen that they lose not only
puede ser que
Namibia,
pierdan el
it could
apartheid.
happen that they even lose apartheid.
Si Sudáfrica se
If
arriesga
South Africa takes
a una
the
catástrofe
risk
militar,
of a military catastrophe,
puede ser el fin del apartheid,
that could even be the end
porque
of
ese régimen es
apartheid,
demasiado débil,
because that regime is too weak
demasiado
in itself,
débil
too
políticamente,
weak politically,
y tiene demasiada gente
and that
oprimida
regime
allí,
keeps too many people
que
oppressed,
no se puede arriesgar a una derrota
and that regime,
militar
I
grande.
don't think it's
No
able
se
to
puede
risk
arriesgar una
a big
catástrofe
military
militar.
defeat,
Nosotros lo
a
sabemos,
military catastrophe.
pero no
We know it,
queremos.
but we don't want that to
No
happen.
queremos una
And
victoria
we
militar.
don't want a military victory.
Queremos que este problema se
We
resuelva
feel
ahora
that this problem should
y
be
creo que
solved now.
estaríamos en la
And we
antesala
think that then we would be in the
de la
threshold
solución del problema
of a solution
del apartheid.
to the problem of
Creo
apartheid,
que uno de los grandes problemas que le
which
quedan
I
no solo al
think is
África,
one of the
sino al
great
mundo.
problems remaining to Africa, not only to Africa but to the world at large.
But even if the South Africans and the Cubans all leave Angola, that still leaves Savimbi free in the country, still supported by the United States. John Stockwell tells us more about Savimbi.
South Africa's policy is to keep Angola destabilized. They've kept their armies in southern Angola for about 10 years, since the 75 thing. They've costed billions of dollars in damages. They raid and bomb throughout, up into the central part of the country, with the purpose of, of just keeping the country off balance and keeping it at war and keeping it from being able to spend its money to build schools and hospitals. And they've supported Savimbi because he can work with his guerrilla forces and go in and raid and blow things up deep into the country. So they've armed him and fed him and kept him viable. Well, superficially, this is very appealing. This guy is macho plus. He is very charismatic. He's a beautiful guy. He's fun. He's got these kind of wide popping eyes and this energy, and he's got a quality which very few of these liberation leaders have, which is he likes to fight. He likes to be in the bush with his men. And everywhere else in the world, the trouble, like the Contra commanders, they want to be in Tegucigalpa or in Miami. And they don't want to go in there and die in the hills of northern Nicaragua. They want to get in Managua and drive the Mercedes. But Savimbi wants to be in there with his men, directing the things.
And you know him well. You spent time with him, I guess, didn't you?
I went into his lair and recruited him into our program, and then indirectly managed the liaison with him. That charisma and his yen for the contest, and he's fighting communists, a Marxist government. And man, that's simple. We have to support him. We have a moral obligation to support him. Wow, let's give him some money. Now, it gets a little bit more wrinkledy when you add in the fact that Savimbi is an avowed Marxist.
I didn't know that.
Oh,
He was a Maoist. He was fighting the Portuguese colonialists under a Marxist Maoist banner.
In the last year, we've had Savimbi going on television and telling about his plans if he ever gets into power to reorganize the country along Marxist lines. Now, what we're doing, and we've given him the first $15 million to Savimbi, and we've got trainers in there with him right now to train him in his terrorist activities. And this is the man we would go in and work with. Now, the congressmen and senators that I was talking to would say, well, what are our alternatives? And I was saying that's easy. We establish relations with the government of Angola, which is what Gulf and Rockefeller and everybody have been saying all along, to provide the diplomatic umbrella and influence for our corporations that are doing great business there right now. And then we order South Africa to get her troops out of the country because they have a policy of destabilizing this country. And of course we shut off aid to Savimbi and hopefully starve him out, so that he has a choice of working peacefully, politically in the country, which may be impossible now because there's so much bloodshed, but it was possible originally. Or he can go live somewhere else and play some other game.
John, what is the response of the rest of the world toward Angola?
You know, what is it, 97% of the world condemns this. We're on the wrong side. For us to be holding hands with and working with South Africa in the brutalization of a black African country is criminal and just totally impolitic.